Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here. I want to do a different video today, not my usual chart and market update and review, but I want to run a thought by you, challenge your thinking a little bit, and get your thoughts and opinions on what I'm about to present and see what you have to say about it. But I'm going to talk about the capitulation that I think is coming with this downtrend we're seeing and the potential for a massive run to happen in the second half of 2018. And so let's take a quick look at where we are coming from the top near 19K and just the big pullback that we've seen in some of the support levels. So first on the daily chart, everyone's watching this broader downtrend that has been in play. And yes, it's a bear market, even if it's only a couple of months long. It is a bear market. It's a bear trend. At the lows in February, we were down 60+% here with the washout, and we're still down significantly from the highs. And if you look at the altcoin market, down even further and has been even more beat up versus the BTC pairs. And on the flip side, there is this rising support line that is also being highly watched right now, and it's forming this very tight, very narrow pattern, which will resolve itself here over the next couple of weeks. And I believe that the crypto markets will bottom out in April because of a couple of things. I think we're going to see some capitulation here happen in the near term, but also because of this scenario that I'm going to lay out here in a minute. So the near term things to watch are this pattern that everyone's watching. At this time, the momentum is certainly in favor of the bears. The selling pressure continues, and the more that this trend line gets tested, there's a very good probability that it will crack to the downside unless we see some big volume reversal that takes us back into the mid lower 9Ks here pretty soon. We're gonna need to keep an eye out for this downside breaking. People are also watching the potential of a descending triangle forming here on this pattern. And let me kind of lay that out here. I'm going to move the timeout, but you can see the descending triangle pattern here is also in play, and the lower support line being that closing basis of this most recent low around that mid $6,000 level or so. And so those are a couple of patterns, and they're very bearish at this point, right? Descending triangle pattern generally breaks to the downside. It is a bearish pattern all around. And so if it breaks, what are the levels to be watching? Well, the first important level is that most recent low that we saw in February around that 6K mark. So that's going to be the first level to be watching as a support. Could we come back? Could we retest that level, or maybe just a little bit above that? And so that's the first key level to watch. Below that, the last big base we saw around that 5K area is going to be the strong level of support that I expect to show up if this gets really bad and we continue to sell off below the February lows. And so this range, and I know it's a big range, but this 5 to 6K range is the level to really pay attention to if this thing starts to really break to the downside and we see that final washout, that capitulation. And the reason I say that is because markets tend to have that final exponential move at the end of a run, whether it's up or down. You can see it on the way up when markets are strong, they march higher, and then towards the end, it just goes climactic and you see this exponential move. The same thing happens on the downside. You're getting this downtrend, and towards the end of the move, the downtrend really accelerates, and that's when everybody throws in the towels. And most of the time, it's human psychology, it's human nature that people will get out at the most inopportune times, and vice versa. They will FOMO in at the worst times and buy near the tops. And unfortunately, we've seen this cycle in all markets, not just the crypto space, but you see this play out over and over, and you see that acceleration towards the end. And that's what I'm thinking we could see here, right? If you're seeing this kind of march lower, if we start to break this downtrend, then you could see that acceleration and the downside goes exponential, even if it's only for a few days or a week. And the other thing too is look at the RSI. there's certainly room to go on the downside on this daily chart and before we hit these extreme oversold conditions. And so we could see that capitulation, the last folks throwing in the towel. You look out on the social media space and everything is just so bearish. People are tired of this grind lower. You're seeing people get out of the space. Crypto Bobby did a video talking about this here today, and it's true. I mean, you just see a lot of this despair, this kind of tone of, I don't like this anymore, I'm kind of giving this up, and that just tends to be the signs near the lows. And so those are the, from a sentiment reading, from a chart perspective, that's why I'm thinking we may see the bottom here soon. So now, with that being said, I want to run a thought by you guys and challenge your thinking a little bit on where I think this could go over the coming months. Yes, I said months. We're going to go to the weekly chart. So the common narrative out there right now is we have topped. This is 2014 all over again, and we are due for this very long winter in the crypto space where this bear market lasts for a year to a year and a half before we finally base out. We hit a new accumulation zone, and then we start this bull run. And so that is the common narrative. People are expecting this huge sell-off at the lows of the 2014 bear market. There was a spike low that took it down 86%, but for the most part, the low was basically 80% off the highs. We have not reached that point yet. We did see that spike low in February that took us down 67%. 80% from that high would take us down to the 3K area. And so I want to challenge your thinking with this. What if we are not in 2014, but what if we are actually in 2013? And that's what I'm looking at here. And so let's take a look at this. In 2013, we had this run that took Bitcoin from $11-12, yes, $11 Bitcoin, and had this huge bull cycle that ran up to, at the peak was over $200, but on the closing basis, the high 170s. And so you look at that cycle, and let me mark that out for you guys to see here. Depending on where you marked the low, where there was that $7 mark, we'll start with this. We had this run that went about 20 some weeks here, 24 weeks. You can go back further if you want, but that run from the low to the top was just over 2,000% in gain. And if you look at the breakout point from this most recent high, you can say that run happened here, and it was still 1,200 to about 2,000% gain in 13 weeks. And then we had this sharp correction. We had this pullback that lasted, by the time it bottomed, about 12 weeks. And that pullback from the very top to the bottom here bottomed out around 71% at the lows. And so 12 weeks, down 71, and then we had the next big run that took it to new highs, and it took it from $73 all the way up to $1,100 from the lows. Now that's clearly not, it took a while to get over the new highs. So if you look at just from the new highs, it was still a massive percent move. The absolute high value, we went up another 300%. From the lows, we went up about 1,800%, and that happened relatively quickly, so in 20 bars. And so if you take this same scenario and we apply it to the current markets, and we say we are not in 2014, but rather this is a similar cycle to what we saw in 2013, and you extrapolate that out, let's see where that goes. So keep these numbers in mind. The first run up was about 24 bars. The correction lasted 12, this is weeks here, so 12 weeks. And then the next cycle went up about 20 weeks to the top. And so if we come and we fast forward to this market that we saw here, The market, in my opinion, started here in March, the big bull run. We broke out above new highs just shortly after that, above the prior all-time high. So this low point prior to that, all the way up to this cycle to the top here, was about 38 weeks. And that cycle took us from the March low to the top about 2,000%. Very similar to the price action that we saw in 2013. Using the same ratio, so 24 bars, 24 weeks up, 12 weeks correction, then let's say about half of that. And so if we look at the time from the correction down to the lows and we say about 19 bars, that takes us to sometime in middle to late April as the duration for where I think we're going to bottom out. Now, percent move wise, if you go from the top and you go down around 70%, that takes us to $5,500, $5,600, right in the middle of that buy zone that I'm talking about here in terms of the two key support areas. And so $5,500 after 20 weeks takes us right here. Now, isn't that interesting that we've had this big pullback and we could see that capitulation low here in the next week or two, and then maybe that marks the bottom in that zone around the same duration that we would see. Now, this is where it gets interesting. If this plays out this way, look at what happened next. We had the big pullback, and then we had a massive run, and this was the big run, right, that took us to the highs and ultimately led to that long-term extended bear market. And so this from low to top was about a 15% or 1,500% move, and from the absolute high, the old highs to new highs, was around 350%. So let's do 350% from our most recent highs, and that takes us from about that 19-20K mark. 350% takes us to about $83,000. So 83,000 BTC. What if we do 1,500% from the lows, similar to the lows from 2013 up to the most recent top in 14? So if you do 1,500%, let's say it bottoms out around 5,500. 1,500% is, I'm going to have to extend the chart here, but that takes us back into that 80K range. And so there's a couple of ways to look at that. And of course, I'm not saying Bitcoin is going to be at $80,000 this year. In fact, I think it would take longer. If we did see that happen, it would most likely run into 2019 before we reach those levels. But even going halfway there, even just saying, hey, this is only going to take you 500 or 600% off of the extreme lows, you're still talking $40,000, $50,000 Bitcoin before it tops out, and then we see that big correction. And so if Bitcoin does get to these crazy numbers that at this point, right, we're all looking at 7,000 and 8,000 Bitcoin, possibly going to 5. The thought of even thinking 50,000 Bitcoin, 70,000 Bitcoin is almost, we can't even picture that right now, right? And it's very similar to what we all thought in early 17 when we were all excited about Bitcoin breaking 2,000, and just the thought of, hey, in a few months we might actually be close to 20,000. Like you couldn't really picture that. And so I can totally understand the skepticism of maybe even considering that. But if we did see that huge run up, and then we got the big bear at that point that really consolidated for a year and a half, you'd be talking about the top being 50, 60, maybe $80,000 Bitcoin. And at that point, yeah, you could see a 70, 80% pullback, but then you're only talking about it's going to take us back down to 10K, and that's currently higher than the prices we have today. And so just kind of interesting to see that, and that's what I'm watching for here. I really do think the market's going to bottom out here, and how high it ultimately goes when it does. Is it just a short-term bounce and then we see another leg lower, or is that going to play out and we see a 2014, 2013, 2014 type scenario play out where we get another massive bull cycle before it ultimately tops out. The other thing to watch, you guys know I talk RSI a lot. When RSI remains above 40, the market still is in bull mode and we could see it go higher. When the market is very weak, it tends to correct well below the 40 mark and usually washes out sub 30. So it peaks out at 60 when it's weak. You can see it peaked out here around 59, 58 when it's weak, and it tends to bottom out in the sub 30 range, and vice versa. When it's very strong, it peaks out well above the 70, 80 mark, and it bottoms out around 40. And so on this weekly chart, the RSI is currently sitting at 48, 46. And so we still have a little bit of room to the downside, and it would still keep it above that 40 mark. And so another reason to think that this potentially could happen. So I want to get your thoughts on this, guys. It's just an idea I wanted to throw out there, kind of challenge your thinking a little bit. We're all very bearish right now. The tone is certainly caution, one of weariness, if you will. But this is something that the more I look at, the more I compare historical moves, the more I'm thinking that this is very likely a scenario, and we are not in 2014. And regardless of this, if this plays out or not, and we don't go to these crazy numbers, 70, 80,000 Bitcoin, I still don't believe that we're going to see a year and a half long bear market, this protracted decline that just continues to grind lower. In fact, I think a lot of the altcoins have already hit their lows versus BTC. Many of them are very close. And so once Bitcoin bottoms out, I fully expect the altcoin market to have a pretty decent rally here. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think. Post them on the comments below. I'd like to get a different point of view on this and your feedback. Thanks for watching, everyone. Talk to you later. Take care.